Welcome to the Market Maker Strategy video course. The main focus of this course will be the understanding of how large traders enter and exit their positions in the market, and how they manipulate retail traders in order to do so. This course will also focus a lot more on the practical side of things because that's a more effective way of learning this type of trading approach. There will be a little bit of theory also, so we can have the best of both theoretical and practical worlds. Without further ado, let's jump right into the first idea that we must understand in order to grasp the mechanics of how market makers act in the market. This first idea is the concept of cognitive biases and their inherent presence in all human beings. A cognitive bias is a lens through which we see the world. This metaphorical lens has the property of steering our thinking process in certain directions automatically, hence the name cognitive bias. Cognitive biases are a result of biological evolution over hundreds of thousands of years, and each and every one of these biases have an evolutionary reason to exist, otherwise they would not be naturally selected at all. The problem is that a lot of these cognitive biases are in a certain way obsolete to modern world activities. This happens because our society evolves and alters its complexity much faster than biological evolution is able to keep up. One of the ramifications of this is called the intelligence paradox because the same biases that enabled human beings to survive and develop complex societies and intelligence are the same biases that hinder this intelligence due to this discrepancy between how fast society evolves and how fast biological evolution shapes our nature. Without getting too deep about the origins and developments of the cognitive biases, for the purposes of this course we should focus on three main cognitive biases. The first one is called von Restorff effect, the second one is called reverse psychology, and the third is called bandwagon effect. These are the three cognitive biases that market makers take advantage of in various types of situations. In some way, these three biases function as different layers, which is something that adds to the complexity of how market makers act. In other words, we can analyze a manipulative maneuver in terms of the von Restorff effect alone, in terms of the reverse psychology bias alone, in terms of the bandwagon effect, and of course, we can analyze them together. In this first lecture we are going to see the theoretical definition of these three biases and their abstract representation. I feel this is a good start, so we can build on this foundation later with the various types of practical examples. If you fail to understand these things in theory, you will have a more difficult time understanding what happens in practice, so try to bypass the urge of jumping right into the practical examples. Let's begin by seeing what the von Restorff effect means. This is a cognitive bias that draws your attention to information that stands out in the middle of similar information. For example, if you see a price chart where the candles are all relatively the same size, and then all of a sudden, a massive candle appears, your attention will be automatically shifted towards that massive candle. In the first milliseconds of that massive candle formation, you cannot even control this impulse. That's basically a defense mechanism built into our brains. A few seconds after the candle formation, we are able to voluntarily choose to shift our attention to where we want. This is a crucial point because most retail traders are not even aware such thing exists. Market makers capitalize on this unawareness of most traders, and they can sometimes induce the creation of a candle like that on purpose with the goal of shifting the attention of retail traders from the important area in the chart. This can be considered the first step of a manipulation in the market, and it's similar to what a few magicians and con artists do. They shift the attention of the public to something that is not important while they do their trick in the place that no one is paying attention to. This is the classic sleight of hand. This is basically how market makers start their manipulations maneuvers. That's roughly speaking how the von Restorff effect plays out in this situation. The other cognitive bias involved in market manipulations is the so-called reverse psychology. The confusion generated by this cognitive bias is its biggest feature. That's exactly what market makers are after. They want retail traders to be insecure and confused about their positions. That's the case because they know very well that a confused trader is a lot more likely to start breaking the rules of his trade plan assuming there is one. The breaking of good rules about risk management and impulsive trading on the part of retail traders is how market makers feed themselves, and they know how to take advantage of these things in an almost scary way. Back to the reverse psychology bias, let's try to break down this idea in conceptual terms first. Reverse psychology advocates a certain behavior with the opposite quality of what is desired with the goal of making someone else act in the way it is truly desired. In other words, market makers make use of reverse psychology to make retail traders believe the market is going to go up, for example, but in reality, market makers want the market to go down. The opposite is also true, of course. Reverse psychology is a practical necessity for market makers because that's the only way they can hit clusters of orders, and hitting clusters of orders is a necessity to open extraordinarily large orders in any market. Don't worry about that for now because we are going to see what these terms mean later in the course. The third bias involved in this manipulative process is called the bandwagon effect, which is the notion that people tend to follow what appears to be the general consensus of the crowd, even when it's not obvious what this consensus might be. That's a demonstration of how powerful a bias like that can be because individuals will put their trust in the ability of the crowd to judge what's right and what's wrong. The bandwagon effect has a pretty clear evolutionary reason to exist, which is that individuals who tended to act in groups were more likely to survive in dangerous situations thousands of years ago. This is an oversimplification, of course, but that's the general idea. The problem is that the crowd that acts by impulse in the market is usually wrong and all over the place. In some sense, the immense crowd of retail traders is somehow unaware of its own power as a group, which is a strange little irony about the market. That happens because traders don't think about themselves as a group. They think about themselves as individuals, so you can imagine that retail traders are something like a crowd of people who is uninterested in the survival of the others. They just happen to be going in the same direction most of the time. The unfortunate nature of the bandwagon effect is that people tend to act by impulse when they see something that resembles an opportunity that they might be missing, so they jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, hence the name of the bias. Needless to say at this point, but market makers love the fact that most traders in the market act like that. In fact, the bandwagon effect is one of the major driving forces that catapult the market makers' positions to where they want them to be. All market makers must do is to create the illusion that there is an opportunity in the market that traders will feel like they will be missing. As I said earlier, these three cognitive biases are the primordial ways in which market makers apply their tricks in the market. The question that remains is why market makers need to employ such techniques in the market and why can't they simply trade using regular contextual trading and market logic? They can certainly do that, and they probably reach market maker status through those techniques. However, market makers are playing a different game than retail traders. Their positions are so large that they cannot simply open a trade anywhere they want in the chart like retail traders do because there is often a lack of liquidity for that. Just as an example, market makers have positions that surpass thousands of standard lots in the market, and that's a lot of money. They cannot simply buy or sell such quantities without distorting the market too much and making their plan too obvious for everyone else. That's why they need to cover up their agenda in a rather cynical way by exploiting mental patterns that are guaranteed to be present in all traders. For this first lecture, it's important that we understand the three main cognitive biases that are exploited by market makers and how the intersection of these three elements are used as some sort of axis to twist and turn the intuitions of millions of retail traders all around the world.